I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I grew up during what I'm going to call the big civil rights movement. Back then, it was the Jim Crow laws of the South, where there were whites-only water fountains. You have to sit at the back of the bus. If you went to a movie theater, you sat in the balcony. So it was separate facilities. The schools were segregated, right? That's where I grew up under. Things weren't right. Even from a little child, the first time it hit me, I must have been about 12 years old. We'd been to a parade in Savannah. That's where I grew up, actually. And after the parade, we went to a Crystal Burger to get a hamburger and a drink. And after standing, I wanted to sit down. And I sat on the stool, and my mother snatched me up. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "You can't sit." Well, I didn't understand that. Why can't I sit? And she didn't want to get into a big explanation there in front of everybody. And then it really dawned on me how things were different because of the color of my skin. What's interesting is that while that was going on within the Black community, there was a whole nother thing going on that's now called colorism, that you weren't allowed to participate in certain activities if you couldn't pass the paper bag test. The brown paper bag test. So if your skin was darker than the brown paper bag, you couldn't be a majorette, you couldn't be a cheerleader, you couldn't be a queen. So I was getting it from both sides. I became an activist in my own right. I was a little young, and I lived with my grandmother, so she wouldn't permit me to participate in any of the marches because she was fearful, because people were being hurt. You know, water hoses were being turned on protesters, and people were dying. But when I got to college, there were a couple of times that I participated in marches to the Capitol. I lived in Tallahassee at the time. And, you know, peaceful protests, of course. Nothing violent, but making your voice heard. But I had my own way of, you know, participating. Getting an education, I think, helped, because it helped to break down some of the barriers you don't have access to if you're not as educated. Better paying jobs, better housing. I decided I didn't want to go to an integrated school because there was just so much violence. So I stayed at the segregated school, which at times felt great. But as I look back, I felt like I got a secondary education because we didn't get the new books. We got the books that were passed down from the white schools. Now, you all have, everybody's together. And not that people get along, but you have equal access to come to a Florida Poly or a Florida State or University of Florida. So it's gotten better. Is there room? Yes, there's always room, but it has gotten better. There will always be a need for a civil rights movement. I mean, it took time before slavery was completely abolished. It took time for Black people to get the right to vote. It took time for the integration process, for you to be able to go to an integrated school and not have to have the National Guard escort you in. So these things will take time, but it also means that you have to have somebody out there advocating on the behalf of people who don't have a voice. Just in the last few years, we've seen a lot of attention paid to voting rights. Although we've had the right to vote, there have been legislation that's making it hard for people to vote. Some of the laws that are being passed, some of the actions that are being taken against people because of their sexual orientation. You're always going to have people out there who don't like someone. And so what happens is hate just breeds hate, right? And people are taught to hate. It's not something you are born with, it's something that you're taught. And there are always going to be people who don't like people because of the way they look, period. And I am just not optimistic that that is ever going to go away. But I'm hoping that we get to a place again where it doesn't become the way it is now. It's gotten pretty bad now. I mean, when I look at some of the things that's going on, it takes me back to the 60s. And there's no reason for it. It really and truly isn't. I mean, I don't agree with everything, with every black person in America. But people have the right to feel the way that they feel. And unless you're infringing upon my personal space, then you can have your opinion and we can just agree to disagree. But there will always be a need for a civil rights movement. Well, I still would like to see us make progress to living more harmoniously. And I understand that there are people who don't like each other. But if we can just be less violent, more respectful, and just learn to live harmoniously, although we may not agree on things, but just be a little bit more kinder.